I'm delighted to introduce our Strand 5 plenary speaker, Vinicius Nobre. Vinnie is Director of Education at CNA in Brazil, an MA tutor for the University of Chichester, a university lecturer, and a Cambridge CELTA and DELTA tutor. Vinnie has published reference books and a range of teaching materials and resources. He is also a past president of BRAZ-TESOL. During Vinnie's plenary, we recommend watching in speaker view. And if you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A box for Vinnie. Without any further ado, please share your screen, Vinnie.
Oops, I think I shared the wrong. Sorry, just a second. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, David. Thank you very, very much for the invitation. Thank you very much for organizing such a lovely event. I feel really privileged and humbled to be here today and talking about a topic that may not be as immediately appealing, because I think that we don't usually talk about the difficult things. We don't usually have the difficult conversations in conferences. And I am so glad that, that there is room for us to analyze teachers' working conditions in this gathering. I think that this is a very, very important topic. We need to talk a little bit about how teachers have been offered support and how working conditions can impact teachers' self-efficacy and eventually learning outcomes as well. It's maybe a less a pragmatic session, but in my opinion, an essential conversation that we need to have. And one of the reasons why I am particularly interested in this topic, and one of the reasons why I felt so happy to be invited to talk about this with you today, is because currently I am in charge of a chain of schools, and we have over 600, we have about 670 schools in Brazil and more than 4,000 teachers working with us. So monitoring, analyzing, assessing the different working conditions in this range of contexts is part of my job. And there is a lot of learning involved. I'm going to share with you some of the insights and some of the lessons that I have learned from this experience, not only in my current position, but also having had the opportunity to work in such diverse contexts. So let me start by making posing a question, actually, bringing some thought-provoking reflection to you, hopefully. If I ask you, why do some teachers stay in the profession and others leave? What can you say? What is it that makes a teacher stay, in the profession and others leave? I think this is a question that we all ask ourselves. I believe that some of us might have been tempted before. We might have wanted to leave the profession, and still we decided to stay. And we might have had friends who left the profession. And sometimes it's hard to understand why. But the fact of the matter is that whatever the answer is, and today I'm going to hint a little bit at possible reasons why some teachers leave the profession and others stays, we need to think globally and act locally. My talk today is an invitation for us to act collectively towards further professionalism in our field and consider how we can improve overall conditions for young learners, practitioners in our contexts. And if you are a school leader, if you are a coordinator, if you are an educator, I urge you to reflect even more about the question I posed before. Why do some teachers leave and some stay? And how can you act within your scope of action to change this? If you are a teacher, please bear in mind that leadership is not a position. Leadership is an attitude. And you can also act locally within the possibilities and the capabilities that are offered to you, thinking globally, thinking about the small things that we do every day and how these things might encourage teachers to stay and pursue the profession for a long time and not quit and not leave. This is necessary because teacher retention has been a major concern since the 1970s. We face an issue with teacher retention, right? And I don't know if in your context this is a real issue, or maybe not such a big concern, but in my context, I am speaking from Brazil, everyone, teacher retention is a serious concern. There is plenty of research that shows how this is also an issue in other countries like the US and the UK. So I reckon that this might be a concern to most of us, right? And it is something that we need to talk about. And working conditions is particularly important, and especially when we are talking about young learners. And here, when I say young learners, I am talking about pretty much all the age groups that are within young learners. This talk has a more macro perspective on how working conditions can impact the work of teachers who are dealing with the very little ones, with older students, but it's still within the realm of young learners and teenagers overall. Because at the end of the day, these age groups, they are so special, and teachers need to be so naturally motivated. It's such a huge responsibility to work with these age groups, and we don't want teachers to drop out, because we understand and we know that teachers of young learners and teenagers can really make a difference and eventually help us change the world. Large-scale studies support the claim that teachers leave schools with poor working conditions. This is a fact, okay? And this is one of the big messages that I want to put across today. If we don't focus on working conditions, if we don't improve conditions for practitioners to work with young learners and teenagers for that matter, we are going to have more and more teachers leaving schools. And in my talk, in the next 40 minutes or so, I intend to show you what the consequences are, and prove to all of you, hopefully, that this is a really serious issue, that teachers who leave the profession, and leaving the profession because of poor conditions is a fact, is something that happens a lot. And as a consequence, we face the decrease in the quality of learner outcomes. And one of the things that triggers all of this movement is the lack of motivation, the lack of self-efficacy that teachers feel when the working conditions are not enough, are not appropriate. So throughout our conversation, once again, I ask you to reflect upon what we can do as individuals, thinking about the whole globe, but acting within our scope to make sure that working conditions get better. Researchers have long understood that workplace conditions to be critical to teachers' self-efficacy, satisfaction, and career decisions. This only comes to corroborate what I've been repeating, basically, but I really want to make this point. Teachers' motivation, self-efficacy is one of the greatest pillars in motivational theory. Teachers' motivation is directly connected to workplace conditions. If we don't have the support, and I see some of the comments in the chat, and it's really reassuring to see that so many of you relate to this, but it's also very sad to realize that this is an issue in so many contexts, because when the workplace conditions are not appropriate, teachers feel less efficient. This is the whole idea behind self-efficacy. It's the image that you have of yourself. It's how you perceive your own potential of efficacy, how effective and efficient you believe you can be, which directly impacts motivation. So this is kind of like all connected. The conditions that you work in are not appropriate. You feel that you can do less. Because you feel that you can do less, you lose motivation and you quit the profession. You feel less satisfied and you make career decisions that might include quitting. Research in general also shows that increase in teacher turnover consistently correspond with decreases in achievement in core academic subjects. So when we talk about this, and we need to bring this conversation to higher levels, to the real decision makers, because it's not just a matter of losing good people and that's it, or it's not just a matter of being concerned about the well-being of teachers for the sake of it. There is a political, social, educational agenda as well. The moment we start losing teachers, our students also perform more poorly. I know it sounds a bit obvious, but when we get all this data, we realize that this is an urgent issue, because if we continue losing teachers because we don't have the necessary conditions to work in, we are going to impact negatively all the future generations, because their achievement in core academic subjects will not be the same. So when we think about teacher retention, when we talk about teacher retention and focus on this, we understand the significant role that it has in the operation of schools. What are just some of the consequences that this high turnover of teachers might bring to us? Well, first of all, if we have a high turnover of teachers, it will impede student performance. There is interesting research that shows that the more often we change student or teachers, the more frequently it happens, the lower the performance of students will be in general. It also diverts resources away from efforts to improve schools, because our energy and even some of our financial resources are directed towards replacing teachers, recruiting and training and selecting teachers. The high turnover also places large numbers of inexperienced, less effective teachers in classrooms. And here, please, please, please don't get me wrong, there is absolutely no judgment regarding novice teachers or less experienced teachers, but we all know what our first year was like, right? We all know that it took us a while to get our bearings and to understand what we were doing. So the moment we have a significant number of new teachers starting every semester, every term, every year, we also have a consequence. We also have an impact, because these teachers are less comfortable with what they are doing. They are less confident, and it does impact. And I'm not saying, under no circumstance am I saying that an experienced teacher is naturally an effective teacher, okay? One of my favorite quotes, I believe it was Penny Ur who said this, but it might have been somebody else. I always get these things wrong, by the way. But one of my favorite quotes says that some people say they have 20 years of experience. And the question is, do you really have 20 years of experience, or do you have 1 year of experience repeated 20 times? So when we talk about experienced teachers, we are talking about the teachers who engaged in professional development. We're talking about the teachers who reflected, who learned from experience, worked together in a community, teachers who are on a Sunday participating in the IATEFL Young Learners and the YLT-SIG Emerald Anniversary event, teachers who are constantly learning. These are the experienced teachers we're talking about, right? And high turnover also increases recruiting, hiring, and training budgets. So as a school leader myself, I've been working with school management for about 20 years now, being responsible for different types of programs and having different leadership posts. As a school leader, one of my biggest concerns today, if you ask me, Vinnie, when you go to bed, what is it that prevents you from sleeping well? One of the first things on my list is teacher turnover. We lose good teachers all the time. We lose good teachers to other schools. We lose good teachers to other careers. And that breaks my heart. And it breaks my heart not only because I know that this is going to generate further expenses to the school, and it's going to bring more work to the recruiters, but it breaks my heart because I know that the students will be impacted very negatively eventually, and this is going to have a social consequence, and everyone is going to have to pay the bill afterwards, right? So what we are looking at is a very dangerous cycle at the moment. We offer poor working conditions to our educators, to our teachers of young learners. As a consequence, they lose self-efficacy, they lose motivation. This triggers high turnover, and what we are witnessing in many contexts is a decreased learner achievement. This cycle is extremely harmful, and if we don't break it, if we don't do something about it, we are going to have generations and generations of young learners um, that are not given the opportunity to develop or to achieve more, because their teachers are still learning what to do, because the experienced teachers, the proficient teachers, lost motivation and left the career. And this might be very much connected, actually this is very much connected to the working conditions that they are in. So I know this is a fairly negative scenario. It's a bit grim, but there are lots of things that we can do, and I'd like to focus our attention on this a little bit, because as I said, everyone here, everyone, it doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter where you are, we can all do our tiny little things. We can all make small contributions in order to positively impact the world. The first thing, and I think that if you forget everything that I say here, I would like you to remember this idea that strong collegial relationships have a direct correlation to school improvement and success. When we talk about working conditions, many times we are thinking about what the managers can offer us, what the school can offer us, and this is true. But working conditions go beyond that. And this is where I believe we all play a major role. We build relationships, right? Schools are communities. Yesterday, we saw a beautiful talk about this, how about the power of communities. Rachel talked about the power of communities and how schools are communities. And if we consider that each one of us belongs to this community and can positively impact the community, we start making a change. If we build relationships that are more positive, we can, as teachers, as educators, as coordinators of young learners, we can positively impact school improvement and student success. Um, how does that go? Well, I don't know about you, but unfortunately, I've had experiences in which the new teacher was not really welcome, for example, by the experienced teachers, and felt like an outcast without any kind of support. I've worked in contexts, for example, where teachers wouldn't share their production and their materials because they were very jealous of whatever they produced, and they would not share it with other teachers. I've worked in contexts in which teachers complained about the kids and had a very negative, almost on the verge of being unethical, had a very negative unethical behavior, let's say, in the teacher's room, in the staff room, talking about the kids. The collegial relationships I'm talking about are vital for us to maintain professionalism and good working conditions. I'm not talking on of course, the computer that you have in your classroom, or the Play-Doh that you have access to, or all the scissors and all the materials that you need, and the stationery. All of these practical things are part of working conditions, absolutely. But there are other more subjective issues that we cannot turn a blind eye to. And the relationships that we build, the connection that we have, as Maria Jose has mentioned, the sense of belonging, this is everyone's responsibility. And this can definitely make a teacher decide to stay or decide to leave. So when I talk about improving working conditions, I am talking about something that we can all do. I am talking about something that is everyone's responsibility. It is looking at the person next to you and identifying whether they are facing a burn down or a breakdown, or if they could if you can offer any kind of support, or just making sure that the environment amongst teachers and students and the kids and the young learners, making sure that this relationship is healthy and positive, right? There are key components, now being more pragmatic, there are key components that must be included in programs that aim at improving practitioners' working conditions. And I would like to explore actually 5 of them. There is one that is not here that I'm going to explore, which is resources. I'd like to explore 5 of them: orientation and protected time, school leadership, professional development, teacher empowerment, and also resources. These 5 pillars, these 5 components can very much impact the level of improvement that we want to face when it comes to the conditions for the teachers of young learners and teenagers. What are these 5 components in further detail? Time, first of all. Class size. Class size matters. The number of students that we have matters. And then you ask me, Vinnie, then what is the ideal number of students? Well, there is no ideal number of students. Different contexts will have different class sizes, but what matters is that you as a teacher feel that the class size that you have and the time that is allocated for you to manage those students, they are logical, they are coherent, that you have enough time to connect with your students. I see that Anna has mentioned Slovenia, about 27 and 29 pupils per class. It would be very interesting if you could share. I would love to see how many students you work with. And I think it would also be an interesting exercise for everyone to see what the other contexts are like, right? So from 27 to 29, some people will work with maybe 12. Some people might have, as we have here, Maria Jesus, 37 to 45. There is no ideal class size, let's say. But what is ideal is that you have the time to connect and to monitor and to talk to all of these students. So maybe if you have 45 students, this could look a bit daunting, but you also have a class assistant, or maybe you have other conditions. So what I'm trying to say is that there is no recipe, but class size does matter. Also, as a natural consequence, the availability of time for teachers to meet the needs of all their students. We understand that students have different needs. We have finally understood, after many years of treating students the same, right, in the old methodologies and pedagogies, treating students the same way, we have finally understood that individuals learn in different ways, and we need to look at the students as individuals, and we need to try and differentiate their experiences, their learning experiences, and try to cater to their specific needs. It takes time. It takes time for us to study, for us to prepare, to plan, to devise activities, and we need to have enough time to be available to meet the needs of all of our students. This is part of, appropriate working conditions. Also, we need to have opportunities for teachers to collaborate with their colleagues. I can't highlight enough the power of collaboration, the power of cooperation. And I'm usually preaching to the converted when I say this, right? Because if you are here, you're probably the kind of teacher who will generously share and talk to other teachers and support them and collaborate. And the question that I pose is, how can we multiply this attitude, this behavior? How can we inspire other teachers to also collaborate, to also cooperate? This is something that we can do. We don't need to wait for the school principal or the school coordinator to design collaboration activities or dynamics. As individuals, we can try to mobilize other teachers, to influence other teachers so that they start collaborating a little bit more. And also, we need to be protected from duties that have the potential to interrupt the main purpose. Our main purpose is to educate the students. In many contexts, I don't know if this is true where you work, but in many contexts, I see layers and layers of bureaucracy being added on top of what we do. Forms that have to be filled in, paperwork, and endless lesson plans, and that there's just so much paperwork and bureaucracy going on sometimes in different places that we don't have the time to educate the learners, right? We don't have the time to really do what we're supposed to do, which is to research education, to look at the individual student, to devise more effective and interesting tasks. So I would be very interested in learning if you can share with me to what extent does bureaucracy or paperwork, to what extent do these things, these other duties, impact the work that you do, right? So time is very important when it comes to improving working conditions, finding ways to give teachers more time to focus on what really matters. Also, school leadership. And what is the role of the school leadership when it comes to working conditions? And improving the working conditions, sorry. The school leadership sets the tone for trust and mutual respect. In the research I had the opportunity to access, a lot of teachers claim that they left their jobs and sometimes they left their professions because they didn't feel respected. They didn't feel that they could trust their leadership or even their colleagues. School leadership has this responsibility to make sure that teachers feel that they can trust each other and that they respect each other. Yesterday, I thought, as I was watching the sessions, I thought it was very interesting how some of you called the attention of other participants towards mutual respect, right? I think that that was a beautiful thing to see, because some participants might have chosen the wrong words to talk about a session that was going on. And immediately, a lot of you asked for respect. This is so inspiring. And this is what you can do to positively impact working conditions. If you draw people's attention to the fact that they are not being respectful and you immediately give them feedback on that, you are making a huge contribution towards an environment of trust, right? Also, school leadership should establish high standards for the delivery of instruction. I know this is sometimes uncomfortable and it's a difficult thing to do, because as a school leader myself, sometimes when we set high standards, some teachers complain because of the pressure, but if we communicate the importance of the high standards, if the high standards are clear and well explained, and even better, if the teachers can participate in the construction of the standards so that they can be very high, things become a little easier. But it is a fact that if you are working in a place that doesn't have standards, if you are working in a context that doesn't really care about what teachers are doing, this will negatively impact your working conditions, and as a consequence, also your sense of self-efficacy and eventually students' outcome. School leadership should also assess teacher performance objectively. We need to be more comfortable with being assessed. It is part of professionalizing our practice. I know it's not comfortable. As a teacher many years ago, I would also frown upon the idea that somebody would come and assess my lessons. But if we want to professionalize our practice, we need to understand that assessment is not a negative thing. As we know, when we assess our learners and we're not simply testing them, but really fully assessing learners to inform our decisions, to guide them, to give them concrete feedback. We're helping them tremendously. The same thing should happen to us. If we get assessment that is formative, that is continuous, that is constructive, we're all going to become better teachers, right? But it needs to be done objectively and not just based on feelings, impressions, or a lack of criteria, for example. And school leadership should also recognize teachers for their accomplishments. Feeling that what you're doing is generating good, feeling that what you are doing is an accomplishment is one of the best feelings in the world. And many times we get this from our students. We have, and when we work with young learners, we know that it's so genuine and so spontaneous, and it warms our hearts, and it's just so good to get a card or just a hug or a piece of chocolate. These are all examples of recognition for our accomplishments, but it shouldn't come from the students only. It needs to come from the whole community, and school leadership has this mission. School leaders, they need to create a system of continuous recognition for teachers' accomplishments. The third pillar, the third dimension in how we can improve working conditions is our focus on professional development. Professional development is a buzzword, let's say. Everybody talks about it, but if I can be very honest and frank, many people do it wrongly. Why? And I'm going to actually say how we can do it better, right? And then hopefully you will find ways to assess how you can change in your scope the professional development initiatives that either you pursue yourself or that the people around you are promoting. First of all, professional development to positively impact working conditions, to positively impact working conditions, professional development needs to give teachers resources and time to do it, right? It is one thing to tell teachers, oh, you have to develop professionally. And it's another thing to give them the resources, sometimes financial resources, sometimes more concrete resources like a book, for example, and time. So in many places, I've seen school leaders dedicating Friday for professional development, for example. This is one instance in which professional development receives allocated time. Time is provided for teachers to do it. So this is one example of how we can improve the quality of professional development. Also, it should be data-driven. I have seen a lot of contexts in which somebody decides what to do, right? Oh, I think that we need to work on total physical response. And when you ask the coordinator or whoever decided that total physical response is the answer, they say, oh, because I think it's important, or because somebody asked for it. This is not data driven. For us to decide on how professional development is going to be implemented, for us to decide on what topic it's going to be, we need to have data. We need to collect data. We need to be more scientific, really, about our practices and less passionate, let's say. I think we are all passionate and we should be passionate, but when making decisions, we need to be very rational. We need to really focus on our reasoning and collect data and allow this data to inform us how professional development is going to be implemented, what topics, how it's going to be measured, if there is any return on the investment, and so on and so forth. This goes for the leaders, but this goes for the individual teacher, right? When I am selecting my professional development initiatives, I feel that I am more motivated when I make this decision based on data. I can do a course that I am interested in, something that I like, or I can do a course that is on a topic that I like, but that is also going to positively impact my practice and based on the data that I gathered regarding my own teaching practice, right? Yes, Abigail, there are a lot of questions about certificates, everyone. I'm trying to follow the chat, but I have to confess it's a bit confusing to follow the comments on the session and the questions when there are so many questions about certificates. And I urge you, since we're talking about improving working conditions, my working conditions would improve tremendously if the chat was used for only the topic of the session. There are amazing people sharing experiences and talking about, what they do and the challenges they face. And sometimes it could be a bit misleading to have all the certificate questions there. And then, since we're talking about working conditions, I must confess that this impacts my working conditions negatively. So I kindly ask you to focus on what we're talking about and maybe ask questions about the certificates later, right? Because at the end of the day, I know certificates are really important, but the process that we go through is maybe more important than the final product. And we want to create this image. We want people to see us as professionals who are focused on developing and not just collecting certificates. I'm sorry if I digress, but I had to share. Well, anyway, going back to professional development, it needs to be aligned to school improvement. Sometimes we select professional development initiatives that are interesting to us, but that may not be relevant to the school. It's very important that we try to find some common ground. Do things that we like, do things that we love, but also choose professional development initiatives that are relevant and aligned to the school itself. It's also important that professional development be designed to meet the differentiated needs of teachers. There is no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to professional development. We need, the same way we talk about differentiated learning, when we're talking about the young learners we have and each student and each teenager, we also need to look at teachers individually. So offering teachers the same course and just make everybody enroll and do the same webinar without any kind of customization is not necessarily good for the working conditions overall. And finally, professional development should allow teachers to work with colleagues in an effort to refine their practices, right? It's not just doing what we want. Let me give you an example. I always give this example as much as people hate this, but in many conferences I see, and especially conferences for the teachers of young learners, I see sessions with 3 practical ideas, 3 warm-ups, 2 activities, 1 story that you can tell. These are interesting resources, but they don't necessarily refine our practices. Professional development theory, and then Donald Freeman has a lot to say about this, among other people, but professional development theory accepts the fact that for us to truly develop professionally, we need to get into teachers' thinking. If I just accumulate activities, if I just accumulate games and stories and practical behaviors that I can have in class, I am not refining my practice. For me to refine my practice, I need to understand the theoretical background behind the games. I need to understand the reasons why I would decide to do one thing or the other. So professional development initiatives that truly and positively impact our working conditions, they refine our practices, right? And they don't simply enrich our repertoire of mechanical robotic activities that anyone can do, for example. For our conditions to be improved, we also need facilities and resources. And when working with young learners and teenagers, we know that we need a lot of resources and we need good facilities. We need adequate, appropriate instructional and technological materials. I apologize. We need adequate, appropriate instructional and technological materials, devices, and infrastructures, right? Different contexts will offer us different technological materials, for example, even devices, but we need to have enough to work well with the kids and the teens. And we need to have we need to see an effort. We need to perceive an intention from everyone, from other teachers, from the leaders, to improve, constantly revisit and reassess the facilities and resources that we have. We also need professional support personnel. Teachers are not supposed to be their own computer technicians. Teachers need support from people who know what they are doing, from experts in their fields. And we need to have a clean and adequate workspace that is conducive to teaching and learning. Finally, teacher empowerment is a very important dimension in improving working conditions. Teachers need to be recognized as educational experts. There are a lot of people out there who think they know what education is about, who will come to us and give advice. Wendy, technology, good question. Technology is not just computers, right? We need to broaden our perspective of what technology is. Sometimes resources that are a pen is considered to be a technological improvement, for example. So when I say technology, this is a wonderful question. I am not talking necessarily about computers or, tablets, even though they might be welcome in some contexts, depending on the learning objectives of that particular context. But I am talking about all the devices that development has brought to us, right? Technological improvements in general. A wonderful question, by the way. Teachers need to be recognized as educational experts. There are a lot of people, I don't know in your context, but a lot of people that tell us what to do. A lot of families that will come and complain about what we're doing because they know better. We need to find space in our societies to be acknowledged and respected as educational experts. And it is really, really important that we fight together for this recognition, and everyone has this responsibility. Also, teachers need to be trusted and relied upon to make decisions about instruction and other educational issues. I see in a lot of cases, schools or whole systems making decisions top down, and a lot of the decision makers are not educators. They haven't even been working in education, and then suddenly they decide what teachers have to do with their young learners, for example. And just to reinforce this, for the working conditions to be better, teachers need to be involved in school improvements. What we know is that teachers with greater self-efficacy, teachers who feel that they can do better, teachers who are confident and motivated, are more persistent and resilient when faced with challenges and setbacks. Everyone in every profession, in every context, will eventually face a huge challenge or a number of setbacks. This is a fact of life. We are all, possible victims of this. But the difference is how we manage these challenges, how we overcome these setbacks. And the more resilient we are, the more self-efficacy we feel, the more successful we become as well. And there is evidence of strong positive associations between teacher self-efficacy and student achievement. So at the end of the day, everything that I'm talking about, all the working conditions, they are of course aimed at improving what we do and allowing us to do what we do. But ultimately, what I'm talking about is giving our young learners and our teenagers the possibility, the opportunity to do better, right? To achieve more. The better our working conditions, the more motivated we are, the more self-efficacy we have, and as a consequence, the more achievement, motivation, and self-efficacy our students are going to perceive. But in all of this confusion, we have suddenly to face COVID, right? And COVID brought new challenges to us. It made it harder for us to engage students in remote learning. It made it harder for us to balance professional and personal responsibilities. It made it harder for us to deal with inequities in education. And the pandemic resulted in a sudden large drop in teachers' sense of success. I am not going to delve too much into this because I have brought other people's voices to share a little bit with us what we as teachers had to deal with during the pandemic. Can you all hear it?
Honestly, the first thing I want to do is just burst into tears.
My tank is empty and I need to binge all the Girl Scout cookies and only wear sweatpants for at least 3 months straight.
I've been a teacher for 27 years, and this is the first time I have just hated what I do. It has nothing to do with the kids.
We were heroes 1 minute and then vilified. People wanted to blame us for having schools closed.
I wanted to stand outside the school with a megaphone and just shout, I am just a lady. I have no idea what is going on, but I am here and I'm really trying my best.
There are things that I think we'll be able to take away from this, but for the most part, it's like,
I have taught hybrid, then remote, then back to in-person, then we got quarantined, and then I have to do state testing. Somebody somewhere is not listening to educators.
So I had my kids in the classroom, not really socially distanced. Then I had my kids on Zoom. Then I had kids I never was able to find. They were just missing. Like, to take attendance, like, I just gave up.
I care about my kids. I love them. But I feel like I'm choosing between my sanity and everything admin requires of me.
I think one of the hardest things, it's making the middle schoolers wear their masks so we can stay at school. It's like, would you just put the damn mask on and leave it on your face, please?
It's been a struggle, but I also have really valued this year as a time to question a lot of the things that we believe about public education.
This is our chance to really shake up education, to look at what really matters, to look at how do we spend our 53 minutes in class each day.
I teach high school ELL students, to see them struggling at first, but overcoming all their challenges in a virtual environment.
I'm so grateful that I looked outside as a way to safely bring my students back to school. Some days, our read alouds take place under a canopy of tall pine trees.
I can't do this without getting broken up. This year has been the most challenging, but the most rewarding. And I'm so proud of all of us, teachers, administrators, students. We couldn't have done it without each other.
America's educators are stronger and braver than you think. If we can make it through this year, we can make it through anything.
So as we all know, this only, I believe, comes to reinforce what we had to face during the pandemic, right? Our working conditions were severely impacted because we had challenges that we had never anticipated before. But supportive working conditions in schools played a critical role in helping teachers to sustain their sense of success. And teachers were less likely to experience declines in their sense of success when they worked in schools with strong communication, targeted training, meaningful collaboration, fair expectations, and authentic recognition during the pandemic. I saw one of the comments that said that we need more systematic, more structural support, that there is little that we can do ourselves. I have to agree with you entirely, but since I am talking to educators and school leaders, I have to address what we can do. And as much as I say as that there is a limit to what we can do, there is still a lot that we can do. And as an educator who's completely passionate about helping young learners and teenagers develop and become better citizens so that the world can be a better place when they are the ones making the decisions, I need to consider what we can do within our local scope to impact globally. And strong communication is something that we can all do. Suggest the kind of training that we need as well. Collaborate meaningfully. Help our colleagues develop fair expectations and recognize the people around us in our community. These are all things that we can do, and these are things that helped teachers stay in the profession during the pandemic. Schools can then begin by developing systems for strong communication, recognizing teachers' efforts so that teachers don't feel isolated. It is very painful and hurtful to feel isolated when we're, working with something so beautiful as education and young learners. Setting expectations for work. We all need boundaries. We all need expectations and criteria. Asking teachers what kind of training they feel they need. And designing structures for formal and informal collaboration. So in the last 50 minutes, I've been trying to share with you a little bit how important working conditions are, what a sensitive issue this is, and I've been also trying to show you that there is quite a lot that we can do, even though there is a limitation. But all I know is that teachers want to make a difference in the lives of students. Nobody gets into teaching because they want to become rich. We all want to make a difference in the lives of our learners. Yet, too often, teachers find themselves in contexts where they feel isolated and ineffective. When this happens, and teachers cannot achieve a sense of success, they leave. I think that if we're here today, if we've been together for this weekend, and with the support of TESOL and the YLT-SIG, we can work together and we can find ways to make teachers stay. If we improve the working conditions and we do what we can do within our scope, maybe we will have teachers staying longer, students achieving more, and hopefully a much better place. Thank you very much, everyone. It was such a pleasure to be here with you today.
Well, Vinnie, thank you so much. What a powerful and strong message from your plenary today that clearly resonated with so many people, and all the comments in the chat showed the reaction and the way colleagues around the world could connect to this topic that, as you said in your introduction, is so under-focused on in conferences, and yet impacts each and every one of us so much, and impacts some people, many people, really negatively. And you shared so many messages of empowerment as well, in showing that, yes, the systems globally need to change, but as a collective, as a community, going back to Rachel's session yesterday, when the community has a unified voice and is demanding better conditions, demanding their rights as educators to be taken seriously and to be listened to, I think that's a very powerful message indeed. So thank you so much for that plenary and for starting today. Okay, everyone, we're going to take a break. And during our break, we're going to hear from our sponsor, ELT Consultants, and their particular take on this strand, strand 5.